Right now, as you listen, something almost magical is happening. Tiny vibrations in the air are turning into pictures, ideas, and memories inside your head. That is language, the strangest and most powerful thing our species ever invented. So where on earth did it come from? Here is the problem. Language doesn't fossilize. Bones turn to stone and wait for us in the ground. But a spoken word is gone the instant it leaves your mouth. And for almost the entire human story, nobody wrote anything down. Tracing where language began is like mapping a river that left no banks. Our best evidence points to Africa, somewhere between 150 and 200,000 years ago, right around the time our own species, Homo sapiens, first appears. We can't hear those voices, but we can watch their minds waking up. Around 100,000 years ago, people start leaving clues only a symbolic mind would leave. Lumps of red ochre ground into paint, seashells drilled and strung to be worn, to decorate yourself, to make an object mean something. That is the very same spark that lets a sound stand in for an idea. Then, by 40,000 years ago, the lights really come on. Cave paintings, carved figurines, bone flutes you could still pick up and play a tune on today. These were people with fully modern minds, and almost certainly fully modern language. But here is the heartbreak. That very first language, the mother of all the talking that came after, is gone. We will never recover a single word of it. Sound leaves no trace, and 95% of our story happened before anyone could write. So how do we know anything at all? The first answer came from a courtroom in India. In 1786, a British judge named William Jones was studying Sanskrit, the ancient sacred language of the subcontinent, and he noticed something uncanny. Its words looked like Latin, and like Greek, far too alike, he wrote, to be an accident. They must have sprung from one common source. And he was right. Take the simple word for father. In English, father. In German, vater. In Latin, pater. In Sanskrit, pitar. Line up enough words like that across enough languages, and the differences turn out to be astonishingly regular, like clockwork. Run the clock backwards, and you can rebuild words no human has spoken in thousands of years. And these buried connections hide in plain sight. The English word three, the Latin tres, the Hindi teen, the Persian sea, all faint echoes of one ancient word passed mouth to mouth for 6,000 years. Every time you count, you are speaking a fossil older than the pyramids. But the trick has a horizon. Go back about 8 to 10,000 years, and the trail simply goes cold. Languages drift and change so much that the family resemblance dissolves into noise. Beyond that line, the first language stays hidden, maybe forever. You can actually watch this happen. 2,000 years ago, the Romans spread Latin across their empire. But once Rome fell, each region's Latin drifted off on its own, and within 1,000 years it had split into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. 5 new languages grown from one. That slow drift, multiplied across the whole planet in tens of thousands of years, is how 7,000 languages came to be. The deepest we can clearly reach is a language we call Proto-Indo-European, spoken maybe 6,000 years ago. You've never heard of it, but you are related to it. Roughly half the people alive today speak one of its children: English, Spanish, Hindi, Russian, Persian, and hundreds more. So who were they? The trail points to the wide grasslands north of the Black Sea. Herders we call the Yamnaya, with wagons, cattle, and tamed horses. Recent ancient DNA studies even trace their roots to a people living between the Caucasus Mountains and the Volga River. They didn't conquer the world exactly. They herded, migrated, and married their way across it. But Indo-European is just one branch on a much bigger tree. Linguists count around 7,000 languages alive today, sorted into roughly 140 separate families, some as different from one another as a whale is from an oak tree. Want to see where this diversity runs wildest? Look at the island of New Guinea, split into countless valleys by steep mountains and dense jungle. That single island is home to more than 800 different languages, over 1 in every 10 languages on Earth, packed into an area the size of California. When valleys keep people apart, their words drift apart too. In East Asia, the Sino-Tibetan family, anchored by Chinese, is spoken by well over 1 billion people, a living tradition stretching back thousands of years along its great rivers and valleys. And its written characters are among the oldest still in use anywhere. The same basic idea scribes were already carving more than 3,000 years ago. In Africa came one of the great untold migrations, the Bantu, starting from the Green Highlands on the Nigeria-Cameroon border around 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. Farming families carrying iron tools fanned out across half a continent. Today their languages, more than 500 of them, are spoken from Cameroon all the way to South Africa. And the boldest journey of all happened by sea. Around 5,000 years ago, from the island of Taiwan, a seafaring people pushed off in outrigger canoes. Generation after generation, they island-hopped across the open Pacific and Indian Oceans, reaching Madagascar off the coast of Africa, remote Easter Island, Hawaii, and New Zealand. Before the Age of Empires, no people on Earth had ever spread farther. By now, you might notice a pattern. Languages rarely spread on their own. They travel with people, and above all with two things: farming and conquest. Farmers carry their words into new land as they clear and plant it. Empires stamp theirs onto the people they rule. Wherever those forces swept through, a few languages grew enormous, and many smaller ones quietly vanished. For almost all of this story, language was pure sound, vanishing as fast as it was made. Then, about 5,400 years ago, in the mud-brick cities of Sumer, someone pressed a reed into wet clay and froze a word in place: writing. And astonishingly, it was invented completely from scratch at least 3 separate times, in the Middle East, in China, and in the Americas. At first, writing was a job for experts, hundreds of complicated symbols only trained scribes could master. Then, around 3,000 years ago, a seafaring people called the Phoenicians had a brilliant idea: boil it all down to about 24 simple signs, one for each sound, the alphabet. The Greeks added vowels, the Romans reshaped it, and almost every alphabet in use today, from this one to Russian to Arabic, descends from that single Phoenician spark. And writing gave us something almost magical, a way to hear the dead speak. For 14 centuries, no one alive could read Egyptian hieroglyphs. The knowledge was simply lost. Then in 1822, using a single stone carved with the same message in 3 scripts, a Frenchman named Champollion cracked the code. Voices silent for over 1,000 years could suddenly be heard again. Writing changed everything: laws, stories, science, this very sentence. But remember, most of the world's languages were never written down at all. They lived only in mouths and ears, passed from grandparent to grandchild for hundreds of generations. Then came the last 500 years. Sails, ships, and empires. A small handful of languages rode those ships around the planet. English, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, French, carried by trade, conquest, and settlement, until they spanned entire oceans. Take the language you're hearing right now. English is a born thief and proud of it. Roughly a third of its words were lifted from French, a huge share more from Latin, and all told it has snatched up words from around 350 different languages. Every time 2 languages meet, they trade. None of them stays pure, and that is exactly how they stay alive. So with thousands of languages, how does the world even talk to itself? For most of history, trade ran on shared bridge languages: Latin, Aramaic, Swahili, and once French. Today, more than any language before it, that bridge is English. Not because it's better than the rest, but simply because of where those ships and empires happen to go. Which brings us to now. Around 7,000 languages are still spoken today, but more than 4 in every 10 are in danger, many with only a few elderly speakers left. You may have heard that a language dies every 2 weeks. The real number is gentler but still sobering. Every few months, somewhere, the very last person who speaks a language falls silent. And yet, here is the most beautiful fact of all. Every healthy baby born anywhere on Earth comes ready to learn any one of these 7,000 languages perfectly. Mandarin, Swahili, Finnish, a sign language, it makes no difference. We aren't born speaking one tongue. We're born speaking all of them as possibilities. Language isn't in our blood or our borders. It lives in the shared human mind. Need proof that language lives inside us? In the 1980s, a school in Nicaragua brought together deaf children who had never shared a language. No adult taught them how. And yet, on their own, in just a few years, those children built a brand new sign language from scratch, with its own grammar and rules. For the first time in history, scientists watched a human language be born. And every single one of those languages is an entire universe, its own way of slicing up color, time, family, and feeling, built and polished by thousands of years of human minds. When the last speaker of a language dies, it is not just words that vanish. It is a whole way of seeing the world. But here is the wonder to end on. Every one of those 7,000 tongues, every poem, every joke, every lullaby, traces back to that same first spark, somewhere in Africa, long ago. We are all, still, having one enormous conversation that began around a fire and simply never stopped. And now, you are part of it too.